Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I met my best friend in freshman year of high school. She was this absolutely hilarious girl who could make anyone laugh even during the worst times. We clicked instantly and became inseparable. Everything was great until junior year when she started getting these terrible headaches. After weeks of tests, doctors found a brain tumor. The diagnosis hit all of us hard, but she kept her sense of humor through it all. She had already gone through 2 smaller surgeries to prepare for the main one, which left some visible scars near her hairline. The night before her major surgery, our friend group decided to take her to her favorite restaurant, this cozy Italian place downtown that made the best fettuccine alfredo. We were trying to keep things light, sharing memories and making her laugh. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes from barely sleeping, but she was still cracking jokes. The restaurant was pretty empty since it was getting late, around 11:30 p.m., and we were just finishing up our desserts. That's when this group of drunk guys, probably in their mid-20s, stumbled in. They were being loud and obnoxious, and unfortunately, they spotted our table. We probably looked older than our 16 years, especially since we were dressed up for the dinner. One of them approached our table, swaying slightly. He asked us what we were doing out so late. My friend casually replied that we were just having dinner with her girls. Another one of them asked if we were all single, and my friend jokingly said that she was. The third guy, who seemed the drunkest of all, looked at her with this disgusted expression and said something that made my blood boil. He told her she needed to work on her face if she thought she was going to get somebody like them. His friends burst out laughing like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I was about to stand up and say something, but my friend beat me to it. She looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time since her diagnosis, I heard her speak without any humor in her voice. She told them that getting someone like them would be the worst thing that could happen to her, and that she had a high probability of dying tomorrow. The silence that followed was deafening. Their smug grins disappeared instantly. One of them actually took a step back, like her words had physically pushed him. Another friend of mine broke the silence by commenting on how offensive their behavior was. One of the guys started stammering something that might have been an apology, but his friend grabbed his arm and practically dragged him away. They left the restaurant immediately, practically tripping over themselves to get out. As soon as they were gone, we all looked at each other and burst out laughing. It wasn't really funny, nothing about the situation was, but the way those guys' faces dropped was amazing. My friend turned what could have been a horrible moment into something that showed just how brave she was. The next day, she went into her surgery. It was successful, though recovery took months. Every time we visited her in the hospital, one of us would randomly comment about how offensive things were, and we'd all crack up. The nurses probably thought we were crazy, but it became our inside joke, our way of dealing with scary situations. Those guys never knew that they harassed a 16-year-old girl who was about to have brain surgery, but I bet they think twice now before making fun of someone's appearance. As for my friend, she's now cancer-free and still using her wit to put jerks in their place. Whenever something bad happens, one of us will inevitably send that same message about things being offensive to the group chat, and it never fails to make us smile. My husband and I chose this neighborhood because we wanted our kids to grow up in a peaceful environment. We're both healthcare workers. I'm a nurse and he's a medical technician, and after years of saving, we finally managed to buy our dream house here last year. Everything was perfect for the first few months. Our children, aged 8 and 10, made friends quickly and loved playing in our fenced backyard. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, though we didn't interact much with the elderly woman next door. She lived alone and kept to herself, which was fine by us. The trouble started when summer came around. My kids and their friends, a wonderful mix of families from different backgrounds, would often play together in our yard. They weren't particularly loud, just normal children having fun. But apparently, this was too much for our neighbor to handle. One afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, I heard shouting from outside. When I rushed to check, I found the elderly woman from next door standing at our fence, screaming at our children. She was yelling at them to get out, saying they didn't belong in this neighborhood. When I confronted her, telling her these were my children and our property, she responded that she didn't care whose property it was. She went on about how she was sick of looking at these children running around and how it used to be a nice, quiet neighborhood before we moved in. I was shocked by her blatant racism, but I tried to remain calm for the kids' sake. I suggested she go back to her house because she was frightening the children. Her response was chilling. She said good. She wanted to frighten them, hoping they'd finally stay inside where she wouldn't have to see them. This became a regular occurrence. She'd come out whenever the children were playing, taking videos of them while muttering racist comments. I started recording these incidents too, just in case things escalated. My husband and I reported her behavior to the local police, but they initially said they couldn't do much without concrete evidence of harassment. Then one morning we woke up to find our garden destroyed. Our security cameras caught her sneaking in during the night, uprooting our plants, and spray painting hateful messages on our fence. This time when I called the police, I had evidence. But what really turned things around was social media. My daughter's friend's older sister had been recording some of these incidents and posting them on TikTok. The videos went viral, showing our neighbors' unhinged behavior to the world. People were outraged, and soon local news stations picked up the story. The police could no longer ignore the situation. When they ran her information, they found several outstanding warrants for similar behavior in other neighborhoods. Apparently, we weren't her first targets. One afternoon, while she was in the middle of another one of her rants, police cars pulled up to her house. The officer told her she was under arrest for multiple counts of disorderly conduct, property damage, and harassment. She started protesting, claiming she was a taxpayer who had lived there for 30 years. I spoke up, reminding her that we had the right to live there too. She became even more agitated, trying to blame us for ruining the neighborhood. The officer shut her down quickly, telling her that she was the only one causing problems in the neighborhood and asking her to come with them. They took her away that day. We later learned that along with the current charges, she had outstanding warrants from 2 other counties for similar racist behavior. Though she was released on bond, she was ordered to stay away from our family and undergo mandatory counseling. She ended up selling her house and moving away. The new neighbors are a lovely young couple who often join our weekend barbecues. Our children can now play freely without fear of harassment. The whole experience brought our neighborhood closer together. Families started organizing regular community events, and everyone looks out for each other now. What that woman never understood was that she wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was the one destroying its peace. She's facing multiple civil lawsuits from other families she harassed over the years. Turns out when one person stood up to her, many others found the courage to come forward with their own stories. The videos going viral was the push needed to finally hold her accountable for years of racist behavior. Our quiet little corner of Utah is peaceful again, and now it's truly the dream home we always wanted. Sometimes I think about how close we came to moving away because of her harassment, and I'm glad we stood our ground instead. It taught our children an important lesson about standing up to bullies, no matter their age or position in society. Just last week, we received an unexpected letter from the district attorney's office. They told us that our case had inspired them to create a new community task force focused on addressing discriminatory harassment in residential areas. Our story even caught the attention of a civil rights organization that now uses our case as an example in their community education programs. They emphasize the importance of documenting harassment and how social media can be used responsibly to expose discriminatory behavior. The young couple who bought our former neighbor's house recently had their first child, and our kids love playing with the baby. Every time I see them all together in the yard where so much conflict once took place, I'm reminded that change is possible, even in the most difficult situations. I'm a 23-year-old nursing student working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Between my hospital internship during the day and my evening shifts at a local diner, I barely get enough sleep. That's why when I signed the lease for my current apartment, I specifically paid extra for the most convenient parking spot. I share the apartment with 3 other girls. 2 of them are pretty great. One's a law student and the other studies engineering. Then there's my 4th roommate. Well, let's just say she's something else. Our apartment complex parking situation is already complicated. We used to have 2 parking decks, but the main one is under construction. Now we're all crammed into the second deck, which means we have to park in a weird arrangement. Our apartment gets 4 spots, but they're set up so that the back 2 cars block in the front 2. We came up with what seemed like a perfect system. Since my engineering roommate and I usually leave earliest and return latest, we'd take the back spots. The other 2 would park in front. My entitled roommate started regularly parking in my spot instead of pulling forward to hers. At first, I tried to be understanding. I'd come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift at the hospital, followed by a 6-hour diner shift, only to find her car in my spot. I'd have to either call her to move it or park 2 blocks away and walk home at 2 a.m. When I called her about moving her car, she acted all annoyed and suggested I should just park in the other lot. I had to remind her that it was 2 a.m. and I'd been working since 6 a.m. She eventually agreed to move it but complained that I was being rude about the whole thing. This happened at least 3 times a week. Every time I confronted her, she had a new excuse. Once she claimed she had a really long day of classes, and I tried explaining that I worked 2 jobs and paid extra for the spot. Another time she said she was going out later, so it was just easier for her to park there. I told her that didn't make it okay to take my spot. She would sometimes pretend to forget, saying she was just so busy with everything. I had to keep reminding her we'd had this conversation multiple times already. The final straw came during Thanksgiving break. She went home but left her car parked in my spot for over a week. I had to park in the far lot and walk home in the cold every single night. That's when I decided enough was enough and went to speak with our complex manager. The manager was surprisingly familiar with the situation. She told me they'd received several complaints about my roommate's parking habits, including using handicapped spots without a permit and taking up guest parking. I admitted I hadn't known about that and just wanted her to stop parking in my spot. The manager assured me they would handle it immediately. I honestly didn't expect what happened next. They towed her car and discovered she hadn't even paid for parking that month. Her parking pass was revoked immediately. When she returned from break, all hell broke loose. She started screaming at me about getting her car towed and demanded to know if I was insane, asking if I knew how much it would cost her. When I tried to explain that I had just reported the violation and didn't know they would tow it, she wouldn't listen. She accused me of trying to ruin her life and worried about getting kicked out of college or being evicted. When I questioned how a parking violation could get her kicked out of college, she just kept yelling about how her parents would kill her and how she couldn't believe I would do this to her. My other roommates backed me up though. The law student pointed out that she had been stealing my spot for months and asked what she expected would happen. The engineering roommate added that this wouldn't have happened if she had actually paid for parking in the first place. The entitled roommate ended up having to pay over $500 to get her car back, plus all her unpaid parking fees. She tried to turn our friend group against me, but most people sided with me once they heard the full story. She now has to park in the far lot and walk those 2 blocks every day, while I finally get to use the spot I paid for. She still gives me the silent treatment, but honestly, it's better than having to call her every night to move her car. And mysteriously, she somehow managed to not get kicked out of college over a parking violation. Imagine that. I wanted to share an experience from when I was 17, working at a smoothie shop during my junior year of high school. The job was pretty much perfect for a teenager. Great co-workers, amazing manager, and free smoothies whenever we wanted. Plus, the flexible hours let me keep up with my advanced placement classes and study for standardized tests. I'd always been academically driven, taking the hardest classes and maintaining perfect grades. When I took the American College testing exam for the first time, I actually managed to get a perfect score, something I usually kept quiet about since I didn't want to seem like I was bragging. Most customers at the smoothie shop were pleasant, but we had this one regular customer who'd come in almost daily. He was a businessman in his 40s who treated everyone like they were beneath him. His orders were always ridiculously complicated, and he'd get angry if we didn't get them exactly right. One busy afternoon he came in during our rush hour. He started listing off his complicated order for a double matcha green tea smoothie, rattling through specific requirements about soy milk, protein boost, no ice, and room temperature fruit, along with about 10 more modifications while I tried to keep up at the register. When I politely asked him to repeat the last few modifications to ensure accuracy, he immediately became hostile. He started berating me, questioning my competence, and suggesting that remembering his simple order shouldn't be so difficult. His voice kept getting louder, drawing attention from other customers in the store. I tried to explain that I just wanted to get his order right, but he cut me off and demanded to speak to a manager, loudly complaining about the shop's hiring practices. My manager, having heard the commotion, quickly came over to help. When my manager asked what the problem was, the businessman launched into a complaint about how I couldn't take his order correctly, claiming he was a daily customer and that the service quality was declining. My manager entered his order while I stepped away, hiding behind the orange juice machine to wipe away some tears. The blenders were running full blast, so I couldn't hear what was happening in the front. But later my coworker told me everything. Apparently, after getting his drink, he sat down at a table near another customer and started making nasty comments. He smugly suggested that people working at smoothie shops were there because they couldn't get real jobs. What he didn't know was that the customer he was sitting next to was my neighbor of 15 years, a huge man who stood 6'5" and had a voice that could shake windows when he got angry. And boy, did he get angry. My neighbor stood up, towering over him, and delivered a powerful speech in my defense. He told the businessman about my perfect college entrance exam score, my advanced classes, and my acceptance to 3 Ivy League schools. He explained that I was working there because I was responsible enough to want job experience while maintaining perfect grades. Then he challenged the businessman about his own academic achievements at 17. The businessman's face turned bright red, but my neighbor wasn't finished. He continued his speech, pointing out how the businessman's treatment of me revealed his own insecurities and need to put others down. He ended with a clear warning about consequences if the businessman ever spoke to me that way again. The businessman grabbed his smoothie and practically ran out of the store. He never came back, and we later heard he started going to a smoothie shop across town. My neighbor told my parents about the incident that evening. Now every time I see him, I give him a big hug. He's still my hero for standing up for me that day, even though I've since graduated college and moved on to a career in engineering. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.